Good evening, everyone. This is Olivier Cornet here in the gallery, in the Olivier Cornet Gallery. I am in the exhibition room where we have Eoin Mac Lochlainn's current exhibition, COVID Eyes. So you're all very welcome. I hope you can hear me loud and clear. Just to give you a bit of a presentation. Well, first of all, Jean Ryan, the art historian and storyteller Jean Ryan, is in the other room, so she'll come a bit later. So just to give you a bit of a background about Once Upon a Time in an Art Gallery. Well, Once Upon a Time in an Art Gallery is a collaboration between the Olivier Cornet Gallery, myself as a gallerist, and art historian and storyteller Jean Ryan. Jean Ryan is an Irish art historian who has a special interest in artworks which are influenced by literature. This approach enables her to introduce Irish artists from eras as diverse as the 18th century through to contemporary practitioners who are still influenced by stories of any genre. Through storytelling, Jean has introduced people to artworks held in some of the best Irish museums, public galleries, art centres, private collections, and national institutions. Jean's work has taken her to places as diverse as Dublin Castle, Royal Red, Municipal Gallery DLR Lexicon in Dunleary, Christchurch Cathedral in Dublin, the National Design and Craft Gallery in Kilkenny, and the Olivier Cornet Gallery here in Dublin. We have, over the years, run a few events with Jean, even prior to creating Once Upon a Time, in an art gallery. Really, the aim of this collaboration is to create an environment of discovery and moments where the visitors, well, here, listeners tonight, where the visitors encounter Irish artworks after listening to the story which influenced the artist. So for this online event taking place tonight, an online event in the context of Eoin Mac Lochlainn's COVID Eyes exhibition, you're about to hear a story written and told by Jean, a story that influenced an artwork in the gallery. As the story unfolds, you'll be able to see selected works from the gallery. If you prefer, you can also close your eyes and just listen to the story. But among those selected works that you'll be able to see, one of which was influenced by the story you're about to listen to. If there is an element of the story that really resonates with you and creates an image, we'll ask you to hold on to it and wait until later, until you see that moment that the artist, in this case Eoin Mac Lochlainn, chose from the same story. The story lasts about 15 minutes, 17 minutes to be precise, after which Jean will tell you about the background of the story and its author. After that, you'll see the actual work behind me, and you'll be able to, if you like, to not confront, but to see the work relative to the image that you've created for yourself. And from the next minutes, Jean will talk about the actual work before the artist, Eoin Mac Lochlainn, joins her in conversation. So I'm going to disappear and I'm going to play the recording. I hope you enjoy it. And I might come back later just to say a few final words. So enjoy the evening. I hope you're sitting comfortably at home. You might be having a drink, and talk to you later, and enjoy the evening. Thank you.
Once upon a time, there was a fjord in Norway where a community lived. Their founder, the Dean, a prophet in the minds of his followers, had chosen that majestic place because he thought it would enhance the lived experience of his followers, the brothers and sisters who chose to live simple lives, listening and reading the Word of God, rejecting and saying nay, nay to luxury and to extravagance, and saying yea, yea to charity and goodness. Their chorus of homes were brightly painted in yellows, blues, reds, and oranges, and from these simple wooden houses the congregation looked to the west, and they saw the ever-changing ocean with its infinite horizon and felt small. To the east, their vision was corralled by the mountains to the very point in the fjord where sky, sea, and mountains merged. They lived in a wedge of heaven. They felt so safe there. This was a place where nothing much happened, where the rhythm of life is predictable. So when an event occurred, the inhabitants remembered it for years and years. When the two sisters looked back to June the 20th, 1871, they felt profound gratitude, because that's the day a stranger, a woman with sad eyes, came into their life. She managed to struggle through a storm that raged down the fjord for 2 days. She was carrying a bag. It was her only possession. She held it close to her. Her head bowed low against the rain and the wind, and she could have been swept into the sea at any time. She was utterly, utterly alone. She was nearing the end of a long, sad journey. She was far from home. She knocked on the door of the yellow house, the only one in the village. Would it be opened by the two sisters she'd been sent to? Were they still there? The sisters opened the door to find a woman standing in the rain, mute, exhausted. Her eyes were deep, tired, and troubled. They brought her into the fire, and before she took off her sodden coat, she dug deep into her bag and handed them a letter. Their names in an unfamiliar hand on the envelope. The sisters read the letter. It was written in French. It was written by an opera singer who had been in that very room 15 years previously. Their father, the dean, well, he'd been alive then. The opera singer was on holidays at that time, travelling through Norway after a season singing in the greatest opera houses in Europe. Later, he was to recall that the greatest duet he ever performed was in that modest room, accompanied by the oldest sister. She had a voice that could caress and hollow out sounds. She could create fissures and crevices in sacred music. Before he left, he told her he had never heard a voice like hers. And he told her, "You will be a great artist in heaven. You will enchant the angels." In his letter of introduction, he told them about the distressed stranger with the deep, sad, and empty eyes. She needed sanctuary and care. She had lost everyone she loved and everything she had, and she was lucky to escape France. She was wanted by the state because she had fought at the barricades with the communards in Paris. She was an arsonist, and she'd be guillotined just like her son and husband were if she was captured. Her only chance of escape was through her nephew, who was a cook on the boat which was going to Norway. She knew of the opera singer's experience there and asked if he knew anyone who could help her. He immediately thought of the two sisters and their yellow house. He wrote that the stranger's name was Babette and that she could cook. Babette waited. She searched and looked up into these two faces, wondering what her fate would be. The sisters were aghast. How could one page of a letter hold such suffering? Now, they had very little French, and they had no need for a cook, and they had no money to pay her. But suffering, despair, and vulnerability are not easy to ignore when you have compassion as a compass of your life. Of course, the sisters would give her shelter. Of course, they would give her a home. Time passed, and Babette welcomed the simplicity of their lives. It healed her. She didn't mind the sisters had no money to pay her. She didn't mind they ate simple food. She saw more evidence of their kindness as they distributed most of the food to the sick and needy of their community. Babette gladly took over the cooking. Gradually, the community watched as this fearful woman began to feel at home with them. And like a beautiful plant in the landscape, she began to unfurl and reveal her inner beauty. She was no longer alone, no longer displaced. Her frightened and desperate look faded. And in turn, she nourished the community. She did this through her food, which now held new flavours taken from the very landscape around them. People began to feel stronger. Tummy settled. They didn't feel the cold so badly. They felt happier in themselves. She also nourished through her quiet magnetism, which created calm and stillness. The woman who appeared as a beggar turned out to be a conqueror. She didn't reveal much more about herself to the sisters, but when she spoke of her past, she said fate made her lose everything she had and everyone she loved. But fate brought her to a new home. Maybe fate would bring her luck, as she had a lottery ticket. Maybe one day she might win 10,000 francs. How she laughed at the idea. But 12 years later, she won 10,000 francs. A friend who held her numbers forwarded the good news to her in a letter. And when the money came, the sisters rejoiced with her. Babette's glee was infectious, and the community stood around and they counted all the money into a beautiful wooden box. Nobody had ever seen so much money. But the community were sad because they were sure she would leave them. They were sure Babette would return to her former life. Babette did come to talk to the sisters, but she didn't announce her departure. Instead, she had a request. She asked if she could cook a French meal for the upcoming celebration of the Dean's centenary on the 12th of December that year. The two sisters were taken aback by her kindness, but they would mark the occasion just with a simple meal with coffee. Babette insisted. She also insisted on paying for it. And when the sisters hesitated again, she told them she had never asked them for anything, which was true in the 12 years she'd been with them. So they had to agree, reluctantly though. Well, Babette was energized by the prospect of cooking a French meal again. She pored over the recipe she had carried in her bag all those years ago, and she chose a very special menu for a very special occasion for very special people. When she'd done so, she wrote to the finest food emporiums in Paris and placed her order. Her nephew, who was still working on the ship, he guaranteed her the food would arrive in time for the meal. She waited. December came and the food and drink arrived on time. Now Babette got to work with ingredients she hadn't seen in years. She was full of joy. She sniffed, poked, tasted. She blanched, chopped, steeped, poured, boiled, reduced, baked, roasted, poached. The kitchen was full of aromas and steam, and in the middle of it all was Babette, really enjoying herself. There was quail, caviar, truffles, hams, all of these on the menu. Fine wines, champagne, coffee and tea for afterwards. The sisters became alarmed. This was opulence which their father would wholly disapprove of, but they had given her their word. Things took an alarming turn when they heard something scurrying around the kitchen and peeped in to see a very large turtle. And that turtle was as frightened as they were. What was a turtle doing in their home? This was too much. They ran out of the house and gathered the brethren around them. There were 10 of the village elders asked to the meal. They also became alarmed as they listened to the two sisters. All that rich food, all that excess. The sisters never told them about the turtle. They prayed together and they looked for spiritual guidance. For Babette's sake, they decided to eat the food, but to pray not to taste it. They would be silent on all matters of food in that evening. Now, there were two guests who didn't know of this decision. One was an elderly lady who had lost her sense of taste and smell anyway, and the other was her nephew, a general visiting with her from France for the occasion. He had visited the Yellow House before and had shared simple meals with the sisters and their father 30 years earlier. But now he was an important man. He had risen in society and eaten with royalty and in the best of restaurants. It began to snow on the evening of the meal. The brethren assembled in the Yellow House. The parlour was empty. All the chairs were needed in the dining room. The sisters had lit the fire early, so the room was cosy. They placed a garland of junipers around the father's portrait and lit candles on the mother's workplace just beneath it. The elders formed a circle in that room. They held hands and sang hymns to give them the resolve they needed for the impending meal. The other guests arrived just as Babette called them to dinner. The dining room was beautiful. Babette had thought of everything: fine linen, napkins, wine glasses. Candles ran down the centre of the table, and as each guest sat in their place, the candlelight shone on their face, the greys and blacks of their clothes, and the red uniform that the general wore. They bowed their heads and said grace solemnly. They sipped their drink and began to eat the first course in silence. The general sipped his drink. He sipped it again. He said to himself, "This is an amontillado." He tasted again. It was. And he decided it was the finest he'd ever had. He tried the soup. Again, a taste explosion. He tasted again. It was turtle soup, but it was the best turtle soup he'd had. He hadn't tasted as good since he ate in the Café Anglais in Paris all those years ago. He was incredulous. No one else seemed bothered. The second course was served. Blinis Dermidov. Oh, the caviar, the truffle oil. He could taste the delicacy and the balance of that dish. When he looked around the table, they were all eating it without any surprise or approval, as if they ate it every day. But when he tasted the Veuve Clicquot, he turned to his neighbour, saying, "This is the famous 1860 Veuve Clicquot. It's the rarest vintage of that champagne." The neighbour commented on the weather. The general drank and savoured each and every morsel. He didn't understand what was going on. But finally, the conversation rose around the table as the group shared stories about the Dean and his life. But the general couldn't believe it. When Kaya and sarcophage was served, he put his knife and fork down and spoke about the dish to another guest, who replied, "Yeah, what else would it be?" and quickly rejoined the conversation about a miracle the Dean had performed. Now, the general really hadn't a clue what was going on. This was the best meal he had ever eaten. So now he just relaxed and enjoyed himself. He partook of most of the wines and champagnes because the other guests sipped so slowly. But when the figs, peaches and grapes arrived at the end of the meal, he laughed. He pointed to a beautiful bunch of grapes and said, "Beautiful grapes," to which his neighbour quoted scripture and said, "And they came onto the brook of Eshcol and cut down a branch with one cluster of grapes, and they bore it on 2 staffs." Well, after that response, the general again just rejoined the lively conversation. Now, it was unusual for the elders, who generally ate in relative silence. Over the course of the evening, small misunderstandings were sorted out. There was laughter and gaiety. The group enjoyed themselves immensely, but they never commented on the food. It was time to go, but before they left, the general felt he should make a speech. And when he did, he stood up, and words like righteousness, kindness, nobility, and grace came out of his mouth. It wasn't the language he normally used. It was the language the Dean would have used. The night seemed to possess a new magic for all in that room. The sky was now clear, and the sisters thought the stars were nearer to them than ever before, their sparkle reflected on the surface of the very sea. After the guests had left, the sisters went into Babette, who was sitting quietly in the kitchen, surrounded with pots and pans to be washed. She was exhausted. They thanked her for the meal and were so sorry no one had said anything about her lovely food. They were looking around for the turtle, relieved they hadn't eaten it. Babette turned to them, and she announced that she was a famous cook and had worked in the Café Anglais in Paris. This meant nothing to him. She told them she created dishes for nobility. She told them she was an artist. The sisters were contrite, and they said sadly that they would remember that meal and that evening when she'd returned to Paris. They would remember it forever. And that's when they heard she wasn't going back. Why would she go back there, she said. She had no one there that she loved. Anyway, she'd no money left. How? Where was all the money gone? It turned out she had spent every franc on the meal for that evening. The sisters were dumbfounded. Babette laughed. They didn't realise how much they charged for food in the Café Anglais all those years ago. They all sat in silence for a few minutes, but Babette spoke to them in a clear voice. And she said to them, I cooked that meal for all of you, but I also did it for myself to remind me of who I was, to remind me of my skill, to remind me I was an artist and I always will be. I had the joy of creating memorable evenings for other people and for you. They are so important in life. All the sisters, they went over to Babette and they embraced her. The older ones saying words that had once been said to her. You will be a great artist in heaven. You, Babette, will enchant the angels.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jean Ryan, and you're so welcome to the Olivia Corner Gallery and to Once Upon a Time in the Olivia Corner Gallery. I hope you enjoyed that story. It was written by a Danish writer called Karen Blixen, and she wrote in Danish and in English. And it was made into a film in 1987, and that film won an Academy Award. Now, Karen, for Best Film, Karen was a prestigious writer, and she was shortlisted for the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1962. That's the year that John Steinbeck won it. For the purposes of this evening, I didn't watch the film. I went back to the original short story, which she wrote in 1957. And it was beautiful material to work with as a storyteller. And now you know the story that the artist knew. You can share that experience. And at the beginning of this, Olivier asked you to just imagine a moment that resonated with you. And before he comes and hangs up the work, I'm just going to say that to you again, because now you know the story. So maybe there was an aspect of that story, an emotion, maybe the kindness, maybe Babette's need, maybe Babette's vulnerability. But her ultimate triumph was a beautiful part of the story. But maybe something that was said in the story brought you back to a memory, to an actual place that exists, rather than something that you imagine. Or maybe you let your imagination go with the story and you found expression in the landscape or in the home or the people. Anyway, hold that memory of yours, because that's your response to the story. And I'm going to step out of the gallery now, and Olivier is going to hang up the artist's response to the story. And I'll be back in a minute. So now, you've had a few seconds to look at the image. This was a painting that was made in 2008 by an Irish artist called Eoin Mac Lochlainn. It's called Waiting, and it's Babette. It's Babette's face. And before we talk to Eoin about why he painted it, how he was influenced by the story, I just think it would be really good for me to point out a few things about this painting. One, it's very large. For a portrait, it's large because it's 90 centimeters by 120, which is 3 feet by 4 feet. And you're used to canvases of that size. You've often seen them maybe for landscapes or maybe still life or something like that. But for the purposes of this image, it's a big canvas. And Eoin has used it, and he's exploited the size of that canvas. And what he's done is he's created an image, and he's created it in a very, very thoughtful way. Because if we look, put on my glasses, because if we look at Babette, we see that the face is really big. It's over half the size of the canvas. In fact, it's about 9 times normal size. The woman would barely fit into this room if we added the rest of her body to her. And what he did was, he focuses in on the face in a number of ways. One, by the way he frames her. So she's framed with a very, very dark paint here and very, very dark paint here. So it's like she hovers, she emerges out of the darkness. And using this framing device, we see her completely. And that framing device is opposed, you might say, by a cropping device on the vertical. We don't see the top of her head, we don't see underneath her chin. And that's a technique that artists can use. By doing that, he has placed her in a space that we don't know where she is. It's ambiguous. The only thing that you can make out, which I hope you can make out, is that there's a kind of a structure here, which maybe that light blue light is coming from. So those devices are very important in the context of what Eoin is doing with this painting. And now if we look at how he used colour, if you want to kind of squint your eyes down, you'll be able to see that Eoin has put down blocks of colour. Here you have a very, very dense, dark blue to purple. Beside it is this block of beautiful yellows, creams, and ochres. Beautiful. Beside that, you have a triangle shape of blue here. And here we have another triangle shape of the darkness on the other side of her face. And then we have a line here in the light blue that seems to describe something. It's softer. And then we go on into darkness and up into light again. So we have one light source in the painting, and it's the blue from here. It's illuminating this part of her face. We haven't a clue where this light is coming from, but it's working. It's actually blasting this side of the face. So if we simplify it, you have dark, you have light, you go into darker, well, to blue, darker, blue, and dark again, and then light. And these two together, this lightness is even made stronger or more powerful because Eoin has put this very, very dense colour beside it. And now if we go on and look into what he is doing with his mark making. He is putting down colours so subtly. On this part here, there's no evidence of the artist's hand. There's no evidence of his brushwork. He has just put down paint in a matte fashion. He's done so here as well and here. But on her face, he has put down paint in quite a loose, nearly abstract way. So there are beautiful, beautiful combinations of, there's creams, there's yellows, there's ochres, there's mustards, there's rusts, there's the brown, and very, very rich, beautiful line here. And when you look at the structure of the face, it's as if he has blocks of colour moving across this canvas, building up this image. It's beautiful, this beautiful brushwork, which you can't see because you're too far away. But I'd recommend, if you can, you could come in and look at this beautiful painting. When we go on into the blues, again, you have beautiful colours of blue, lilac, powder blues, there's very light blues, there's turquoises. And yet, he's able to use the darkness when he wants to. Because if you look here, Eoin has put down a very rich but dark brown. It's nearly black. And he's using this here again. There's a darkness here. it feeds into this darkness here and beyond. And then he uses, there's a harmony in it, because the colours of the lips are then in the colour of the eyes. So this is a beautifully constructed painting. And there's you can't see it here, maybe you can, but there's a kind of an electric blue line that he must have done very, very quickly. And it divides just this highlight with the darkness, and it's beautiful. And again, he's using this soft line to describe something. It's probably a shawl. And again, it's suggested. And we can complete it and bring it around to the top, bring it around to the other side, as we could complete the top of her head, because we've enough information to do so. So, why has Eoin made all these decisions? Well, he focuses in completely on the person's face. He has created a beautiful image of emotion. This woman, through her eyes, he has painted anguish and fear, and he has done it in a way and painted her right at the surface of the canvas, like Caravaggio does. So there's an immediacy about her. It's hard to ignore her. So the viewer, as a viewer, you cannot get away from the impact that she has. Olivier is going to come in and he's going to set us up on Zoom. But before he does, I'm going to leave you and just get you to imagine, if Babette could speak, what would she be saying to you? What emotion do you attribute to this image? And I'll be back in a minute.
Jean, I think you can come back.
Hi, all. How are you?
You can hear me.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. I'm going to stand to the side. I'm like the weather girl. Thanks a million for talking to me and
thanks for your story.
Work. The first question I'm going to ask you is, as a storyteller, that's my storyteller hat on, is what and how did the story of Babette's Feast influence you? Why did you use that story in your practice?
Yeah, well, it's a long story, really. Like I did the painting kind of 15 years ago or something like that, and it was during I was involved in the anti-war movement at the time, and I was doing well. When I left college, I was doing this abstract work. I was doing kind of very quiet, color abstracts, and then, like at the weekend, I'd go on a march against trying to stop the war, and it just, in a way, it didn't seem compatible to have the two things going on at the same time. So gradually, kind of, because with abstract work, you can't really kind of say anything. It's just a feeling in a way, and I suppose the more I went, the more we were concerned with the coming war, and that the more I was getting, it was coming into the painting, it was coming into the studio. So I actually, another part of the story was, you might remember Donald Rumsfeld, was he the Secretary of Defense or something in America, and he had this pack of cards, which were 52 cards of the most wanted men in Iraq, and he was handing it out to soldiers as they went off. And it's like the Wild West, we want those guys dead or alive, And I really felt like you can go out there to Iraq and kill 52 Iraqis, but it's not going to make the world a safer place. And so I started, my response was, I was going to do 52 dead Iraqis, really. I called them battered heads, but they were just kind close-ups of heads. Well, I just created them really, but they weren't actual Iraqis. I was just painting these slightly abstract, but you'd know they were battered heads. And I was doing this. I don't think I ever reached 52 of them because it was just sort of not good for the soul to be kind of dwelling on this all the time. And so I painted Babette, one of the first ones. It was like people who have been affected by the war, whether they're women and children and that. And like when I had an exhibition in the art centre in the Linen Hall, like I'd have say 10, 15 battered heads, but then on the other wall there'd be Babette or a picture of a child or whatever. So and gradually, so you can see there's it's still quite an abstract piece, even though it's figurative. And later on, I even became more photographic in a way. It's that's kind of an in between in a way. If I was to talk about the painting itself, Babette was wearing. I never read the book. I saw the film. In fact, I look at the film every year. Really, we look at the film every year here. It's just the thing we do, and it's a wonderful film. And I suppose I was watching it one year, and it struck me. This is a woman affected by a war. She'd been in. All her family had been killed in France, and she was fleeing. And as you said, And when she arrived in that little Danish village, there was a storm out. She was wearing a big cloak. Now that's a bit of her hair at the top, but mostly she's covered in.
Beautifully painted.
And the thing is, like, there was a storm. Like, in a way, you can see it's from a film because, like, there's a storm out, and she arrives, and the light is kind of blue, stormy night. And then inside in the house where she was just arriving to the two sisters, and there was a candle on the table, so the light came from the candle on this side.
It's like okay. So is this the first? Sorry, because I haven't watched the film. So when you decided to use this film as for that purpose of depicting somebody affected by war who's lost everything, this was the first time I'm sure you went through the film and to find the image you wanted, but this is the first time you actually see her in the film.
Yeah, she's just arrived, and she's as you mentioned, like she has a letter, and she gives it to the sisters, and they're reading the letter, and she's waiting anxiously to see will they let her in, type of thing. Really.
No, it's a stunning painting, and the way you've approached it, the way you've cropped it, and the way you've framed it, it's very powerful, I think, for the viewer. It's the word I used was immediate, and the way that she's on the surface, there's no distance between the viewer and her, so you just kind of concentrate on those eyes. It's really, really beautiful. But when I was looking at it, I saw lots of abstract shapes, and it was afterwards that I read that you had started as an abstract artist. And it's just very interesting for me, the transition from going from abstract to figurative, and even then becoming nearly photographically accurate with the portraits that you do now. It's quite a transition.
Yeah, but it's gradual though, over quite a long period of time in a way, And well, I always feel like I'd like to go back to doing abstract. It seems a more pure kind of painting. It was about the effect of color, really. That's what I was interested in.
Right.
And how colors work together to create a certain mood or something.
Yeah. And kind of you could kind of see the way you put this block of dense color beside this. Like, it's very interesting. It's someone who knows about color. does that, I think. Yeah. And the other thing that I really was very interested in, because I'm very interested in mark making, is how, you know, you move the paint around. It's beautiful colours, beautiful shapes. There's really kind of beautiful structures here. But as well as that, the way you leave paint just rest. And this is kind of like a cloud of ochre, and the viewer will feel just over the lip. But as a viewer, we know that the lip goes on. And then as well as that, the way the other side of her chin isn't described at all, it kind of dissolves into the darkness. I think that's really lovely, someone who understands what they're at. And again, here, the side here, there isn't a kind of a harsh line. You know, sometimes people use very harsh line, but in this case, there isn't. And you have these brush strokes coming from her face out into the darkness. And I just think that's beautiful treatment of the subject.
Mm. Thank you.
What can you say? Anyway, but the very interesting thing about this is its size. It's very big for a portrait, and you've cropped right into the face. But there's a work here that's hanging. It's in it, and it's this one, if people can see it.
Yeah.
And it's such a small portrait compared to this large one. And I'm just wondering for you, what are the problems, and why go from large to small, and what are you trying to say then with something small as opposed to something large?
Yeah, okay, there's a few things there as well. And one thing I'd say is that I don't really consider these to be portraits. They're sort of like Babette was a refugee, really, fleeing from war, and it's sort of a painting like that. She's and the idea of hard to explain it, but she's it's an example of a refugee in a way. It happens to be Babette because I saw the film and she suited my subject, but it was about the effects of war and that type of thing. So like right up to today, there are refugees fleeing, looking for sanctuary, as you said, and they don't know what's going to happen to them. That's what waiting anxiously is, putting it mildly in a way.
Yes. Yeah.
But
is it that you don't see this as a portrait because you don't know her personally? Is that it?
Because if I can put it like this, it's sort of using the face to express an emotion. It's not necessarily or an idea. It's not necessarily a person we know. Because she's an actress in a film that was a film of a story in the book. So like there's a few levels back there. It's not it's not somebody I know. That's the simple way of putting it.
Yeah. But, basically, you're using her to express this emotion that you of fear and anguish that people who suffer from war experience.
Yeah, that's what it was. Yeah, it was an exhibition, an anti-war exhibition, if you want, and she was in it. And the smaller picture you have there as well is, again, I wouldn't say it's a portrait. I've done several of them, the same guy, again and again.
Yes.
And some of them are kind of more darker and darker. Some of them are paler and paler, that they're sort of fading away or getting lost. Like, again, it was in the anti-war team that it's the ordinary foot soldiers who suffer and are dispensable, is that the word? Like cannon fodder idea. And so I did a series of them, maybe.
Yeah, I can see them, some of them hanging here, and the kind of the way I describe them for people is it's this expression repeated, except it's kind of like you had the sitter. I think it might have been taken from a photograph though, but that you were in a room where there's a dimmer switch and you can increase the light, because the very first one is very dark and yet the image is there, and as if you're bringing up the light all the way up to where there's nearly a bleached image.
Yeah.
With the exposure of light.
I started with normal color and gradually got darker and darker, actually.
Yeah. You know, they're amazing. They're amazing. And so when you go for something smaller, are you trying to create, because if this is seen in the context of the other images of the same person with darker and lighter color schemes, it's different as to when it's met individually. It's more intimate because of its size. It will draw the person in. Yeah,
actually, a small painting, like you go right up to it and kind of study it, and you can see each brush stroke, and you can see the brush strokes are done with a small brush, whereas you know, you can't make a mistake because people will be right up against it looking at it. Whereas a large painting, because it's large, it's like, wow, that's the effect it has. You don't necessarily. Now, it's interesting, all right. You can go right up to Babette as well, and you know, look at how the brush strokes, as you were talking about. You know, there's more options in a bigger painting, because you can use all sorts of different size brushes, or you can use your thumb, or you can use your, you know, wipe this way and that, and
because I see here at the dark bit, the painted dribbles. I just love to see that. But it's just left. It's just left to do its own thing.
I kind of liked the idea, because it was like, even the canvas is weeping, you know.
It's crying.
So
wow. Wow. Oh, it's stunning. And really, for you and for Olivier, it's such a beautiful piece, and it would be lovely if people could come in to see it, just to appreciate the brushwork that's gone into it, because I can't describe it with, I'd say these amazing shapes that just must have happened very quickly. Like, I'm not surprised that you did abstract work prior to doing this. You can see it. There's these moving shapes going across the canvas, and they're just stunning. And I love the way you just leave paint. It doesn't have to be for this painting. It doesn't have to be exact. You're just leaving it sit, and it runs over into another structure of the face. Here, it's the lips, and they're beautiful paintings.
Thanks. For the big one, you spend a lot of time walking back and forth, for the bigger ones, you know. You have to mix more paint. You have bigger brushes, and you stand back to look at it, and you go up and you stand back, and you're moving all the time. Whereas with a little one, you're sort of right up against it all the time.
So it must be a completely different process for you.
It takes a bit of time to get used to changing from one to the other, you know.
I imagine.
If you're doing small ones for a while, you kind of you have to get used to doing the big ones again, or vice versa.
I even say from the quantity of paint that you'll be using, and the size of the paintbrushes, and how they move across the canvas. I'd imagine, rather than these, it's probably has to be more precise and delicate. And it's small. Well, Eoin, they're fantastic. I'd love to know what you do if you were asked to make a stamp for Ireland. You'd probably make an amazing stamp, because you're able to go from this size to this size. And I think that's us for this evening. I want to finish by saying thank you, by thanking Olivier and yourself, all for letting me talk about this beautiful work of art, for Olivier for putting beautiful images to the story, to Bet's
piece. That was interesting, but the story was lovely,
The story, it was really, for me, it was just lovely working with that story. It really was. And finally, to everybody who joined us this evening, I hope you enjoyed it. And I hope you enjoyed meeting Babette through Once Upon a Time in an Art Gallery. And I'm going to skedoodle off and let Olivier close up. Anyway, thanks a million.
Yes.
Bye. Bye.
Hi, Eoin. Thanks so much tonight. Thank you, Jean. It's been lovely. I think, you know, I would invite anybody to come and see this exhibition, which is running until the 25th of this month. So there's a bit of time left. Babette is one of 15 different paintings. There's even a series of paintings. So it's a must-see exhibition. I've been representing Eoin since 2015, I think. It's a privilege to represent you, Eoin. I just wanted to say that tonight. And I think there was magic between you and Jean. So thanks a lot again. And the gallery is open every day except on Mondays. So again, all you have to do if you'd like to come is just give me a buzz or email me and just to book a time that suits you. And we are, of course, open this weekend. So again, I hope you come and see COVID Eyes at the gallery. And thanks everybody for joining us tonight. I hope the internet connection was fine. We haven't done too many of those sort of live online with somebody in the gallery, and you know, so we're still learning about those things. So again, I'll say goodbye, and again, thanks, Eoin, thanks, Jean. It was a very, very interesting evening. Thank you. Goodbye, everyone. Stay safe. Bye.
Bye.